My favorite thing about my dad is that he falls for all the jokes that we tell him, and that he gives us yes days and goes out to restaurants with us and teaches us how to be healthy. My favorite thing about my dad is he gets the sadness out of me. He's cool. He's into abundance. He even does things and spend time with me and my family. My dad does real estate and business and all those stuff for work, and he teaches people about health, and that's it. My dad does for work is business. He opens us business. He tries to earn money so we don't be poor and things like that. He even communicate with GoBunnies. They can help him with his work and things like that. I wish my dad can go to restaurants more often and have more yes days. I wish my dad did more of spending time with me a lot and just work so much that it's enough of working for him, and he'll spend time with me so much that time.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Today, I am thrilled to talk to Adrian. This is our second time trying this because the first time I had a bad storm come through and it kept ruining my internet, and Adrian would just be sitting there talking to himself. So now we're going to actually have a good conversation. I'm looking forward to actually chatting and not going back and forth on the internet and having to reschedule. But Adrian, if you can, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your family and your businesses.
I appreciate it. And actually, I'm lucky that I get to talk to you 2 times now.
Yay!
So, yay. So my name is Adrian Accay. I'm originally from South Philadelphia, born and raised in Philly, moved to Florida about 3.5 years ago. So I live in Boca Raton, Florida now, which is amazing. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. My son is 7. My daughter is 9, Adrian and Lana. And I'm married 15 years, and I have an amazing wife, very supportive of everything I do, businesses. Went to school for pharmacy. I have a PharmD, and I turned that into a business. I opened up my own pharmacy, honestly, just for freedom purposes. I wanted freedom, which anyone who knows about business knows you do not get freedom when you open up a business. So I was like, so I opened up that. Actually, it took off, did really well. We have 7 of them in Philadelphia. Also invest in real estate, and I have a jiu-jitsu school. I'm a black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And I also now am doing functional medicine, which is actually my true passion. My true passion is health. Everything revolved around health is my passion. So now I get to pour into people on a more holistic level, try to keep people alive past the age of 100. And that's what I'm really, really excited about in the next stage of my life.
That's awesome. Yeah, the functional medicine stuff, especially being in GoBundance, has been one of those things I've been looking into more and more and trying to learn more about and understand more of, because I've been so beat up and I've taken so many garbage medications and all the stuff. I mean, it's the system is so set up to treat the symptom as opposed to the problem, and it drives me crazy. So if we can work on that a little bit more, that would be lovely. Yeah,
and listen, it's a challenge, right? Because I would say maybe 10% of the people want to really find the root cause and do the work to prevent, but 90% just want the pill, you know? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I got to experience that, you know, being in pharmacy for 20 years. I would be like, hey, you could do this, and they're just like, no, just give me a pill. And I'm like, oh, it would drive me crazy, you know? And I get it. Listen, grit, discipline, willpower, it's not as easy as it sounds, right? Mm-hmm. I see it with my kids, right? You're trying to convince them or get them to do something, and they're always just like, I don't want to do that. And I'm just like, but it's better for you. People are reactive, right? They wait until the problem happens until they want to fix it. They don't want to preemptively attack it so it doesn't happen. So, but yeah, no, the functional medicine's great. I think it's going to be the next big thing in healthcare, because I think a lot of people are kind of moving away from the pharmaceutical part. And listen, the pharmaceutical industry is great in the sense that it does treat some really, really important things that you probably can't prevent, right? So if you have like if you're a type 1 diabetic, you don't get insulin, you're dead, right? So like you need insulin, which is incredible. But I think what's happened over time is we've had so many issues along the way with other problems, and the root cause does not benefit the way that the economy works, right? So like, for instance, mass production of food is a huge, it's a great thing because everyone has food. But the problem is when you mass produce food, you're stripping nutrients, you lose micronutrients. Now what ends up happening, you have other issues. And now those issues start showing up as like lack of sleep or issues like that. And then they're like, and you're like, instead of treating that problem and being like, hey, I'm going to, enrich the food with more magnesium or whatever it needs. Yeah. They're like, hey, take this Ambien or take this pill and that'll help you go to sleep. And so I get it. There's a reason for it, and it comes from a good place. But if you get to the root cause, there are a lot of things that you can just prevent by just better nutrition, as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, it's I completely agree. And especially, I mean, I would have never agreed before until I started getting around people that talk about it and learning more about it and understanding it. And then once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, it's hard to come back, now buying a bunch of organic stuff, and then you'll talk to somebody else and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter if you buy organic. There's no way to really test whether or not. And I'm like, I don't know. It kind of seems, when you look at, again, the mass produced stuff and everything, but
and listen, you have kids, right? So it's easy to see, like when you see, fertility problems, early puberty, all these things, you're like, wait, why is this happening, right? So now you got to go to the why. And then you start looking in. And listen, there are some foods that you don't need to buy organic, but there are some that you should definitely buy organic, right? So especially food like fruits that can pierce, that have permeability, pesticides will soak into it. And so now what you're doing is you're putting toxins in your body, essentially. Now, as a child, kids are pretty resilient, right? But it's an accumulation factor. If you do it over and over and over and over, that kid now has taken in antibiotics, hormones, pesticides. And what ends up happening? Oh, well, causes inflammation, might lead to other issues that lead to inflammation. Because oxidative stress, inflammation affect children just like they affect us, and they lead to autoimmune, GI problems, growth issues, early puberty, infertility, like all these things. So I think what's going to end up happening is it's going to become a big enough issue in the US, because a lot of other countries outside the US have already dealt with this issue, and they've made sure not to, like, the toxins that are allowed in the US, there's over 77,000 man-made toxins in the US, versus you look at Europe, there's like 8,000. A lot of the stuff that's legal here is illegal there. Well, why? Yeah. They've already kind of preemptively attacked that issue. And so I think what's going to end up happening is going to be a big movement, and it's kind of going to go backwards a little bit, and they're going to adjust. And it's super important. So I've taken a really, really strong stance with my children about nutrition, and not just nutrition, exercise, health. Like, I am their guru. Like, I coach them. These kids are like, I have a friend of mine just flew in from California to visit. He brought his wife and kids, and we go to the supermarket, and my son's 7. He's reading nutrition facts, and he's like, oh, Dad, this one has seed oil. This one has hot added sugar, and this. He's like, why do they keep doing this? Because we don't allow added sugar in the house. We don't allow seed oils. So, and I'm like, dude, it's cheaper to do, tastes better, you're more likely to buy it. Addict. Exactly, get you addicted. So, if I tell it, the most important thing is teach your kids about health. And if you don't know, learn, because you got to take care of your body.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to rewind to kind of understand a little bit about where you came from, to try to get like how you got to where you are now. So can you talk a little bit about you growing up, what it was like for, young Adrian with your parents, and maybe even your dad's dad, if you know the background there? Yeah.
So that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. So I'm going to tell you, my parents migrated or immigrated from Damascus, Syria. And my grandfather, my dad's father, they actually he didn't read or write. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was the only one of 7 that actually went to college, and he's an electrical engineer, and he loved to learn from a young age. He just wanted to. To this day, he's 73. He spends the first 2 hours of his day learning, and I used to hate it because he used to make me do it too. He's like, you're primed in the morning to learn. You're primed in the morning to learn, and I used to be like, oh, so he used to make me read the paper every morning. It was like a project. You weren't allowed to do anything in the house until you read the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid, I grew up in South Philly. My parents, I would say their religion in the home was education. Like, you couldn't do anything unless you were reading, you were educated, you were constantly doing, which is interesting because my grandfather, my dad's father, was more about hard work. He was like, you work hard, you never give up, grit, 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 grit. And my grandfather died at 78 in Damascus working, never stopped working. And he would leave at 5 a.m., he'd come back at 8 p.m., and he's just working. So my dad said he never really had a relationship with his father because he was always working. But one thing my grandfather did instill in my dad was grit. My dad does not give up. Like, the guy is always in go mode. And so growing up, he added on to my grandfather the grit, he added the education piece. So in my house, it was always grit and education, grit and education. And as a kid, you hate that. You're like, I want to just be a kid, and I don't want to like study all the time or learn or this. But when you get older, you appreciate it. So as a kid, I was always like, I'm nothing like you, Dad. I'm so different. And then as I've gotten older, my wife's like, oh my God, you're just like your dad. You wake up in the morning. I spend the first 2 hours of my day studying, like I will read books or a podcast, or I buy a course, and I just go through it, and I walk on my treadmill. So here's where I added on to this. So my dad also is very much into fitness. So now he's older, but he used to run 5 miles a day, almost every day. I used to always see him running, and but he never lifted weights. That was like, he was against lifting weights. I don't know why, but he was a military guy, so he was all about calisthenic type workouts. Yeah. And growing up in that home, because he was a military guy, he's very authoritative. Now, people from Damascus or the Middle East in general, especially old school, zero emotion. He was not a, come here, give me a hug, son, I love you. It was like, you getting this done? You got to read, you got to study, you got to exercise, boom, 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 boom. Everything was systematic. There was no room for error.
Yeah.
And so I got really, really good at following rules. And to this day, I'm a huge rule follower. I'm very systematic, very routine, regimented. And so I kind of passed the same thing on to my kids, but I added the American touch to it. So South Philly, super dominant home. My dad led Iron Fist. When I was 16, I couldn't take it anymore. So I actually ended up leaving my parents' home, 15 turning 16, and I moved in with my best friend Isaac's family. Amazing people. These people, like, the wife was the working wife, named Sue Bideau. She's written numerous books. And the father was a stay-at-home father. Now, here's where it's an incredible story. These guys have 2 biological kids and 20 adopted children.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Insane. And their whole mission in life is to help as many people as they can. And so their son Isaac, him and I have been best friends since we were like 13, since I was 13. And we became best friends, became super close. So when 16 came, they saw the battle, like Isaac's dad saw the battle between me and my parents. And I was like, growing up, South Philly, very like, get out. I want to get out the house and do things and this. And my parents are like, no. And I rebelled. And so what ended up happening from there is I moved in with Isaac's family, and man, was that an incredible experience, right? So you're getting pure American churchgoers, never miss Sunday church. Dinner at that house was all about, you had to say grace, being thankful, and they celebrated every person's holiday. So whether it was Kwanzaa, whether it was Yom Kippur, whether it was Ramadan, whether it was Easter, anything, they always celebrate and had a theme in the house. And so you got exposure to all these different cultures. Plus, they were very big on having like one-on-one meetings. So almost like we do in Go Abundance, like as a one sheet, the dad would have set times he would meet with the kids, and his office was the porch. And you would sit down with him and you would talk and you would deal with problems, and he would hit you with some hard facts and like hard mentorship. And I got a really awesome way to blend the two worlds. And it was great because, as a kid, because I was pushed so hard, I was a great student, 4.0, straight A's, but I also got mixed up with a lot of bad kids because I was a product of my environment, you know, and in Philly's not, if you're growing up in inner city Philly, I'm not talking about the suburbs, you're going to be around some bad apples.
Yeah.
And so I got mixed up with a lot of bad people, not even knowing. You just go to school with these guys and they're your friends, and then you want to hang out, and then you find out like their brothers are in some things and their other people are in some things, and then you just get mixed up in this crowd, and then you're like, what the hell did I get myself into? And you're like, I can't get out. And so that moving to Isaac's house was the biggest change in my life, because I went to college, I got a full ride at St. Joe's. Isaac's brother was at St. Joe's, so he kind of took me under his wing. He's 4 years older than us. Taught me how to dress, taught me how to like talk. There was a lot of things there, and it was an incredible experience.
That sounds like what a massive change between. How did your parents feel, and how did that get? Like, that would have never flown in my house, like being allowed to jump ship and go hang out at Isaac's house, right? So how did those conversations go, and how did that? What did that do for the relationship?
So, dude, it's very interesting. So my parents, they were livid. They had a connection. So here's what happened. I was working at 15, summer, okay? And the reason why I bring this up, and it's super important for parents to be very mindful on how hard you push your kids. Okay, a lot of parents push their kids, and they push them in a way where they try to dominate, and they're in control. And controlling your kids when they're young has a place, but as they get older, you got to let up, right? Because you just got to trust that what you taught them is going to carry over. And my parents kept trying to control. Now, everybody thinks that your kid is just going to keep listening to you forever. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
The moment that kid hits puberty, there's something in their DNA is like, all right, everything my parents say, I'm going to do the opposite. So I was working at 15, and I remember we didn't have cell phones or any of that stuff. And so there's a street called South Street in Philly, and I used to work at an ice cream shop. I'm coming back, and one of my friends, his dad owns a restaurant. So as I'm rollerblading back home, I got 5 or 6 friends sitting outside, and they're like, hey, like, we're about to have dinner. You should stop over. I'm like, hold on, let me call my parents. So I go inside. I call my dad or my mom, and I'm like, hey, I just saw one of my friends. They're having dinner. Can I have dinner with them? Now, mind you, it was like 7 o'clock. So this is summertime. Yeah. It gets dark around 8:30. So my parents are like, no, you get home right now. Right. And I got really annoyed. So this is the first time I actually ever broke the rule. And the rule was, it's dark, you're home. And I was like, what happens if I don't come? And they were like, what? And they were like, and then my dad gets on the phone. He was like, you get home right now. And I'm like, or what? And I was terrified, dude. It's like standing up to the bully. And he starts going crazy. I broke his word. So what ended up happening is I didn't tell him where I was. And I did not go home that night out of fear of their reaction.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is why I say you got to be really careful with kids, is if they're terrified of you, sometimes they're going to react out of that fear. So I was so afraid to go home that I didn't go home. And I didn't go home for 3 days. And I went, and my mom was losing it. She's looking everywhere, and she's this and that. And I went to another friend's house, Dan, this guy, Dan. And they finally found me. And I told them I'm not going to live under this regime anymore. I was like, this dictator regime, I'm done. And so what ended up happening is Isaac's dad, he had a conversation with my mom. And he was like, listen, if you don't want to lose your son, you guys got to let up, because this is the start. Yeah. And what ended up happening is they had a conversation. I told my parents, I can't live here anymore. So I'm not going to do this. And so to them, they found that moving in with Isaac's family was the lesser of the two evils, because if I just keep running away or do other things, that's going to be worse, right? And they trusted Isaac's family because the parents are awesome. Like, you can't not love them. To this day, they come to my home at least twice a year, once a year, stay over for a week or two. They're my second parents. My kids call them grandma, grandpa, nana, papa. Isaac and I are still best friends. He's a military guy as well, in the Army. He's at Fayetteville, Fort Bragg. Mm-hmm. And so we're actually going to Paris this summer together, him, and his wife. And my wife loves Isaac. Like she sees exactly why him and I are still close. So what ended up happening is he had a talk, and so they were okay. My dad cried. That was the first time, actually second time I ever seen him cry. First time I ever seen him cry was when his dad passed. Mm-hmm. And he was really upset. And I was like, why are you so upset? And I'll be honest, dude, I had a lot of pent up, like anger towards them, because they never let me express who I was. I always felt like I had so much to give, but I wasn't allowed to explore it. Mm-hmm. And I get it. They're coming to a place that they knew nothing about, and they were terrified to let me explore. And they weren't living really in a great neighborhood, right? So, like, to allow me to explore in Philly was terrifying to them.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then when I moved to Isaac's house, I was there for 5 years, and I really did not associate much with my parents. But here's what ended up happening, which was great. They changed. Mm-hmm. I was the catalyst that allowed them to change for both my other brothers. So both my brothers did not deal with the same upbringing that I dealt with.
Okay.
And then they ended up moving out of Philly and moving to a suburb in Delaware County, a really nice one. And my brothers grew up there, and they went to a really good high school, and they went to a really good middle school. And they didn't have that same experience, because my parents were able to let them go, because they realized that the reason they were holding on so tight was because we were in inner city Philly. Mm-hmm. And so when they moved to the suburbs, they're like, oh, we can let up. And they got a different experience. So it was good. And my experience was awesome, because I would have never gotten to live with a family like Isaac's family. So I got to experience both worlds.
Yeah, no kidding. I would imagine, how growing up now, right? You're older now. You've analyzed kind of the background a little bit. You've understood a little bit more, and you're obviously adjusting how you parent based off of some of those feelings and those thoughts. And obviously, you're even sharing that right now. But when did you get to the point where, because you said for 5 years, you didn't really talk much with your parents. When did you actually start talking to them again? And how did that, how's the relationship now, and how did it evolve afterwards?
Yeah. So I ended up getting into pharmacy school after undergrad. And I was going to go live on Temple's campus, which is the ghetto, the roughest area in Philly. And what ended up happening, my parents, the house that we had in South Philly, they didn't sell it when they moved to the suburbs. So they were like, hey, instead of you going to live out at Temple, why don't you just take over our house? Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So I renovated it, made it my own, and it became my home. The house I grew up in. And so the relationship started getting better. My dad changed. So my dad had a hard time adjusting to me becoming an adult. So he kept treating me like a child until I kept standing up to him. It's so funny how the relationship is now, because my dad is like my buddy. He's like he looks up to me. You know, he wants to do something. He was like, hey, should I do this? This. It's so funny. Like, he was this authoritative man, and now he's like a kid. And he's still a great dude, authoritative, everything with everyone, but not with me. With me, he is so different. My mom, I was so close to her as a kid, it's actually shifted, right? So one of the things the reasons why it shifted is I realized that my dad is a go-getter. He goes after things when he wants it, and he's very, very disciplined in achieving his goals.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom is actually the opposite. So my mom, even though she's an electrical engineer as well, super smart woman, very dominant in how she approaches life, but her dominance is actually, I think it's what used to propel my dad to be so rough with us. And so she would push him, and then he would come at us. To this day, she tries to still control the outcome. She's always trying to control the outcome. My dad's like more like, dude, he's a grown man. Leave him alone. All right. Like, let him do his own thing. The guy knows what the hell he's doing. He's doing great in life, but she still tries to. And I'm about to be 42. She's still trying to control the narrative. But I'm super close to them. So when I moved to Boca, I bought them a condo in South Florida, close by to me, so that my kids can grow up with their grandparents. And they're different people, you know, like they see the way I raise my kids, and they were just like, we always wanted to raise you guys that way, but we didn't know how. You know, we didn't know how to do it, and they love it. They love what I do with my kids. Like, we have family meetings, which I took like from Isaac's family. We have one sheets. We have daily journals that we do every morning and evening. We have a week during our family meetings. We review our one sheet every week. We review our weekly goals, our challenges, how we overcame them, and then we always have a topic that we discuss. So today is our family meetings are Friday. Today our topic is habits. Okay, what forms a habit? What's the cue? What's the routine that you do? And what's the reward, right? And how do we shift those habits? Or which habits are doing us well and which habits aren't doing us well? So we're going to have a little exercise, and we're going to talk about our habits, and we're going to talk about where those habits come from, right? So like, for instance, fingernail biting. Does it come from nervousness, boredom? You know, what's the routine? Oh, okay, I bite my fingernails. What's the reward? You feel calm. You feel better, right? So let's go to why do you do that? What's the belief? And so we're going to list everything. We have automated ones, right? So like, hey, putting your shoes on when you go outside, or putting your seatbelt on when you get in the car. And so every week we have a different topic, and I go deep. And so they understand the psyche behind why they do things. And the kids have no clue what the hell's going on, but I think they're starting to get it, because recently I pulled them out of school to put them in homeschooling. And I asked my son, I had a conversation with him. I'm like, listen, are you cool with me taking you out of school? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, why? He was like, I learn more from you than I learn from school. And I'm like, you think so? He was like, Dad, we have conversations every day. We have all these talks. We sit there and do projects together. We have the family meet. He was like, at school, all they teach me is math and reading. And I was like, okay. And I was like, you don't think you learn through other kids? And he was like, yeah, but those kids aren't that great. You know, like, you always tell me, like, we have a thing on we do a quarterly, what makes a good friend. We have all these adjectives. And he was like, they don't match any of my adjectives. And I'm just like, all right, well, you got to find better friends, you know? So like, it was an easier decision to be able to pull them out, because I get to kind of like coach them through life. And we all have coaches, right? Like, as GoBundance guys, I don't know anybody in GoBundance that doesn't have some type of coach or mentor. Yeah. But at schools, these kids don't have it. They're being coached by a teacher. So I used to tell my son, I make both my kids do this. I said, when you get into your first day of class, I want you to ask your teacher, how can I be rich?
Yeah, they're not going to know.
No. And so I'm like, listen, I want you to ask your teacher. So I remember my son comes up. He asked his teacher. He was like, hey, this was in first grade. how can I become rich? And she was just like, keep coming to school, which, okay, I get it. Partially true, right? You want to keep learning, right? But most of them have no clue.
Yeah.
So these are the mentors that are mentoring our children, And listen, money and finance is one aspect of success in life. There's so many different aspects. But at the end of the day, we're raising our kids to be self-sufficient and independent. All right. So we need to put those type of things in there. So grit, never giving up, never stop learning. You want them to be financially independent, especially my daughter. Like, I'm really, really big about financial independence for my daughter. I said, I don't want you to ever feel like you have to depend on someone. I want you to be self-sufficient. And that, not just finance, like even in self-defense, I teach them jujitsu. I opened up a school right next to my house specifically so I could raise my kids on the mat.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've been super impressed with kind of the method that you've used to raise your kids and all the things that you're doing, and like the pure dedication that you put into it to make sure that it's all getting done. Like, you sent me your schedule for the homeschool a couple days ago, and I was like, son of a gun, do I feel, just because I was, I did what I did on purpose with the homeschool stuff, is doing everything I could, because my oldest felt a lot of stress from the school side of the house. I was trying to make it not school, I want you to learn, and I want you to enjoy learning, because if I'm teaching you to hate learning, then that's going to last for a lifetime, and I don't want that. I want you to just enjoy the learning. And he felt so stressed out by all of the stuff that I've made it super relaxed. And I'm going to get rid of the dog out of this office. 1 second, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Kiddos brought him in earlier, and he's driving me bonkers over here. He's a 9-month-old Belgian Malinois, so he's got a lot of energy, and he's like, I need to do something. He's stuck in a small office with me, but so I've been trying to avoid doing this, but I'm realizing now, I think I'm at a point where I need to put some of that structure in. The school year, quote unquote, is basically over. There's only a couple weeks left for him in that. But I told him already, I said, no, I want to keep the education flowing. I want to keep the morning routines going, and like getting together and just discussing different things now that, this book is over. Because the book is over doesn't mean that the learning is over. It just means that, what I'm quote unquote required to teach you, which I'm not required to do much, but is done, So I really appreciated going over your schedule. So I want to, before I go into that schedule portion, you obviously have adjusted the way that you raise your kids a lot based off of your experience as a kid. And then, so how did you kind of start to come through? How did you work through mentally? Because there's people I'm sure listening that are kind of like, they're not on that path yet. They haven't worked through some of their history before. It's one of the reasons I love starting about, like, tell me who your dad is. Yeah. Because that oftentimes will tell us why we do what we do. In this case, it says a lot about why you do what you do, right? You saw some of that stuff, and now your dad is seeing, wow, I totally see what, like, because my parents look at me and they're like, where did you come from? Like, I don't understand, like my sisters are the same way. Like, did he grow up in the same house as us? Like, and it just, I got exposed to different people, which changed the way I think. So how does it that you kind of got down this path? Obviously, at a young age, you had that mindset to kind of go somewhere else and change your environment. So kind of walk me through that understanding and how you got to that path.
Yeah. So a lot of self-reflection. One thing I would say is I'm very, very good at looking at myself.
Have you always been good at looking at yourself, or is that something you had to learn?
I think I was always good at it, and I'll tell you why. I think it was a lack of confidence. Okay, so I think it was all a lack of confidence, where I used to think that I wasn't good enough. So I always wanted to please everyone else. And so because you want to please everyone else, you don't think you're good enough or you're not valuable. You're always looking at yourself, right? So I would do something, and I would kind of look for like approval. And if I didn't get that approval, then I'm like, oh man, I must have did something wrong, right? So I would say that's kind of been my trajectory or my path in life, but it's led me into a really good place to grow, because I'm constantly challenging who I am. Like, oh, people didn't like it, so what could I have done differently? And then that just translated into all these other things in my life. because I wanted to please others. Now I don't feel that way. As an adult, and I've done so much work on myself that I realized that I don't need to please anyone. I need to be filled inside myself. So what ended up happening is so I'll walk you through how it kind of all started. 16-year-old, or let's say as a kid, super held down, no emotions allowed, stop crying, men don't cry, boom, 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 boom. So what happens to a sensitive child when you keep telling them stop crying, act like a man, boom, boom? That softness turns into, or that sensitivity turns into anger.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm an angry teenager. And I'm a dangerous angry teenager because I do combat sports. And I'm fighting all the time. Like, dude, you look at me wrong? What are you looking at? Go. Just go. Because in Philly, people just fight. That's just the way it is. That's how you resolve your issues. And I got to college and I had this real bad temper. And I remember being like, yo, I'm going to end up in jail. I gotta get some help with this, right? So I see anger management. And the one thing the anger management I did was for 2 years, it helped me identify my triggers, right? And so when I started identifying my triggers, I was like, man, why am I angry? So I started looking inside. And from that point, I remember always having someone there to kind of coach me to get better. And so I redefined myself from like the age of 15. I actually wrote it out. I said, 16, I was one person. By 21, I was a completely different person. By 25, I was a different person. By 30, I was a different person. 35, I was a different person. 40, I was a different person. And today I'm different. So I've cycled so many different times to a new person. And there are some consistencies, right? I never give up. I love to learn. I'm super high energy. And I've always loved health, and I love to help people. So going back to your question, ask me it one more time and I'll go right into it.
Yeah. So like, how did you get to kind of where like how did your mentality change to the point where now you're raising the kids the way you are? Like obviously that was a path.
So it was all about looking at inside. And so, when you start seeing anger management, and then you start having like a therapist that can help you, because I had like a business therapist. I like first time I opened up a business, I was like, what the hell? Like, how the hell do I do this? Like all these guys are running multi-million-dollar companies and I could barely keep my head above water with one. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you get the help. And so what I am is I'm a coach for my kids. So I teach them to look at themselves. There's no such thing as blaming others in my home. You blame yourself. You blame yourself. And then you identify what that problem is or why it came about. And then we learn from it. There's no right or wrong. There's no, I made mistakes is how we learn and get better. It's all growth mindset. So when my daughter is like, hey, Adrian's yelling at me, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, hold on a second. Look at yourself. What did you do? What are you reacting to? And it's always introspective. And now I'm starting to see it kind of happen by themselves. And I think by the time they become adults, they're going to have such an advanced personality or mindset on how they can look internally and adjust. Versus like, I didn't get there until like I was older. I had bits and pieces of it when I was in my 20s, but they're getting the bits and pieces I had in my 20s, they're having it as children.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is really just having coaches around. Coach your kids. Your kids need coaches. My kids have a mindset coach they meet with once a week. Literally, they go on Zoom and they have a mindset coach they meet with once a week. They have no idea. So every week I'll email, her name is Kelly. She's awesome. She's in New Jersey. I literally email her and be like, hey, my son doesn't like to get teased. I said, he told me that there's this kid in class that teases him and he doesn't like to lose. So the kid, when he loses at something, the other kid, he'll say, I won to my son, and that will make him feel angry. And so my son comes up, he's like, I don't like him, I hate him, blah, blah, blah. And he always says he won and he lost. And I had to explain to him, I said, your friend wants to feel important.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, and you want to feel important. And I'm like, and I get it. And I was like, I'm going to tell you something. Whether you win or lose, you're important.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I want you to tell your friend that he's important. And he was like, well, what does that mean? And I had to go down the rabbit hole with him. And so I emailed the mindset coach. I said, hey, my son doesn't like to get teased. He wants to win. He wants to feel important. Can we talk about it? And then she'll coach him on the side. So they're constantly getting coached by me, by the mindset coach, by other people, by jujitsu. And that's just, listen, you don't see it, but it's incremental.
Yeah.
And I know now, I feel so good about it because my friend that came on Tuesday to visit me from Cali, he's got 2 kids. And the last time he saw my son, my son was 4. My son is 7. So at 4, the kid barely spoke. You know? At 7, he's having full-fledged adult conversations, asking questions. He's got introspective perception of himself, and my friend's a PhD from Harvard, so the guy's super smart. And he's looking at my son. He was like, "What the hell, dude?" It's like, "You're 7?" And he was just like, you know, and I told him, he was like, "What are you doing?" Now his son is on a different level, you know, like the kid is 11. He can talk to you about, like, he was talking to me about a podcast. He was like, "Hey, how many viewers does this podcast that you're going to be on have? What are you getting from it? Are you doing it for this reason, this reason, this reason? Are you going to push anything? Did you prepare yourself?" I looked at him, I was like, "Take it easy, dude. I'm just going in to talk to some friends."
Just go to talk to a friend, man.
Yeah,
the guy barely has any people listening to him at all. Like,
then I'm like, he was telling me things about podcasts I didn't even know about. So
yeah,
but I was actually proud. I felt like a proud dad. Yeah. Because I'm like, man, I didn't realize how much my son has changed in the last 3 years. And when he saw my friend and he's having my friend's just like, "Dude, your son is awesome. He's so cool. He just asked the right question."
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm doing the right thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get a lot of those with even my 5-year-old when he has those conversations with people, because we have never once, like, I hate like the baby talk nonsense and all that. No, I talk to my kid like they're an adult, because that's what they are going to be. So like, why should I train him to learn like an itty bitty baby when he's not, right?
That's right.
They're not. So I just have good conversations with them. Like, and they're always willing to ask questions and like, "Oh, well, what does that word mean?" You know, because I don't use, you know, kindergarten language with them. I use adult language, you know, like, and that's like, if I say the word superficial, he's going to say, "Okay, well, what does superficial mean?" And then we'll discuss it. Like, this is what it means. So this word, you have your dictionary right there, your kid's dictionary. Let's look it up. Yep. But there's still, you know, I'm gonna try to relate 2 of the things that you've talked about, because I was very much the same way. Told that, like, hey, like, it always seemed shameful to cry, which has made it difficult for me to have conversations with my kids about, you know, when I see them crying, it almost brings back those feelings that I had then, because I don't think I know I haven't done the work internally that I should to correct some of my history. Even though I know some of the negativity that it's coming from, I have yet to really kind of pull some of those strings that you've already pulled and talked about. So how do you kind of make sure that, because even right now as a dad, I'm doing all of these things and I get complimented all the time about my kids. And I'm like, boy, I'm still failing miserably. I don't think I'm doing enough. I know that I need to be doing this, and I know I need to be doing that. So
I think you're being hard on yourself, and you're not failing. Okay.
Well, no, I know I'm not literally failing, but there's still that feeling like, man, there's got to be more here.
Yeah. So listen, at the end of the day, no matter what we do as parents, we're always going to traumatize our kid in some way. Okay. That kid is going to grow up. You could be like, your dad could have been super strict and you're super easy. And then your kid grows up and you're like, "Oh, you were too easy on me." You know, like, there's always going to be some backfire. But here's what I do in terms of sensitivity with my kid. When my son cries, I come to him and I give him a big hug. All of our hugs are a minimum of 20 seconds. I want to feel his energy and I want him to feel my energy. And I hug him. And I just like, "Dude, I love that you're crying. I love it so much. You know why? Because you're being vulnerable with me. And you feel confident and comfortable to be vulnerable with me. And I was like, and that's your way of expressing how you feel. And I love the way you express how you feel. And I love that you express it to me because I'm your biggest fan. I'm your best friend. And you could tell me and you could do anything around me and I'm going to love it and I'm going to respect it. And I just hold him. And I said, and I was like, when you're ready, you can tell me how you feel inside when you're ready. And usually right after like about 30 seconds to a minute, he comes out. He's like, Dad, I'm sad because of this. And I'm like, yep, I'd be sad because of that too. And I walk him down the path. I never negate his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
No, oh, you shouldn't be sad because of that. I'm like, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you feel sad because of that. And I start putting perspective into his life because he doesn't understand the perspective. So like, for instance, he might come up and say he's sad because he got his sister took something from him. Okay. And so he's crying, this and that. Or actually, the last time that he was sad, my wife yelled at him. Okay. My wife yelled at him. So he comes to me, he's sad. He's like, Mom yelled at me. After he's crying, this and that and that. And I'm just like, okay. I was like, why are you sad? And he was like, Mom yelled at me. I was like, cool. And I was just like, why did Mom yell at me? He was like, oh, because she wanted me to go upstairs and go to bed. And I wanted to play. And I'm like, okay, so why did she yell at you? And he was like, well, because I didn't want to go upstairs. And I'm like, okay, why didn't you want to go upstairs? And we go down the rabbit hole. And he's like, well, because I want to stay up. And I'm like, okay, so what's the benefit of staying up? And he was like, oh, I get to play more. I'm like, does playing ever go away? And then he was just like, well, no. And I'm like, all right, can you play tomorrow? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about the benefits of sleep. And then he was just like, well, the benefit of sleep is, like I'm going to be rested. I'm not going to get sick and that. And I'm like, okay, so we have one that will never go away, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to keep playing. I was like, and the other one, I was like, if you get sick, you're not going to be able to play. You're going to be tired. You're not going to grow optimally. And I'm like, so you're not going to get to experience this, right? And I was just like, so maybe Mom just didn't know how to explain that at that moment, because she got frustrated. I was like, and do you ever get frustrated? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, so when you get frustrated, right, we have to communicate. I literally brought them both in. And I said, I called my wife and I called my son. I was like, now I want you guys to have a dialogue. You are frustrated. Why? You are frustrated. Why? And they started having a conversation. And like 2 seconds later, he was happy. And my wife was happy because my wife couldn't express how she was feeling either. So she just got angry. Yeah. And literally after frustration is anger.
Yeah.
And usually frustration turns into anger because you don't know what the trigger of the frustration is. Right. Mm-hmm. And so she starts telling him her perspective, like, hey, I've been working all day. I'm cleaning up after you. Like, you're making a mess and you're doing this and I need a break and this. And I looked at my son. I was like, dude, Mom's tired. Yeah. She's been working all day. Right. I was like, she needs a break. I was like, when you go to bed, that's her time. And we all need our time. And I was like, can you respect that? And he was like, yeah. And then it dissolves. Now, it's hard. I have patience for it. I have so much patience for that stuff. But at the same time, I'm impatient with other things. So, but when it comes to the kids, I'm extremely patient in walking them down that path. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's how I talk to my son when it comes to. Now, my daughter's a little different. My daughter's not as emotional. She doesn't like being hugged. She doesn't like that. So what I have to have is more of an intellectual conversation with my daughter. Mm-hmm. And I have to do it because she's ADHD. So what ends up happening is I have to stimulate her while I have that conversation. Yeah. Like, hey, you want to go rollerblading? And she'll be like, yeah, I'll go rollerblading. You want to go for a walk? So she's got to be doing something, and then I could I could extract everything I need from her. But yeah, that's it, man. I just always show them I care. It's okay. And what that's led to in my relationship with my son and my daughter, and more so my son, is he just always an open door policy. He just comes up to me and he tells me, hey, I want to talk to you. And we just have a full conversation.
When I'm chatting with my kids right now, it's only my sons because my daughter's just shy of a year old as we talk about this, right? But boy, as my son is yelling at my dog in the background, I don't know how much you can hear that, but so as I'm talking to them about their emotions, I try to explain like, hey, emotions are always game. I'm perfectly fine with emotions. I am not perfectly fine with actions that follow the emotions. Right? We can't act out in our emotions. So how do you find the line between the actions and the emotions, like helping them be able to express their emotions without the actions that can follow it? Or like what level do you try to balance those two?
Yeah. So like I said, so when you speak about actions, a lot of them are usually anger actions, right? Like, they threw something, or they yelled, or they hit something, or something like that. So I don't try to deal with that as much as I try to deal with the frustration. I try to get them to identify when they're frustrated. And when they start identifying when they're frustrated, then I ask them like, okay, cool, you're frustrated. So what does that mean about you? And I walk them down the rabbit hole. And usually it's they want control because they want to feel powerful, or they don't want to feel weak. They want to be noticed. They want to feel important, and they don't feel heard, or they don't feel valuable. And once you identify kind of those root causes, then I hit them with, hey, dude, you're super important. Or, hey, babe, you're already powerful. You're already in control. You're in control of your life. You have power. And once I hit them with that, so they start identifying their triggers. And that's so important, because I think this is where my parents failed, is when we would get frustrated, they would shut it down. And then frustration turns into anger. Initially it turns into sadness, then it turns into anger, and then it turns into some, I don't know, whatever, craziness. But if you start identifying like why you're frustrated, it always goes back to a belief system. Always goes back to a belief system. And listen, dude, before you even start with the kids, it's got to start with you, right? So like this happens.
No. It's nothing to do with me.
No, me.
It's always
you as in me.
I'm perfect. I'm perfect. I don't have to do anything with myself.
I'm a 10. So like a few months ago, I got an email from my daughter's teacher. She didn't do her homework, and I instantly got triggered. Now I know when I'm triggered now because I'm so aware of it. I was just like, I was angry, like frustrated, angry. And I go down the rabbit hole. I'm like, hold on a second. Why am I angry? She didn't do her homework. Well, because my wife didn't double check behind her. Well, is it really my wife's job? And then I'm like, well, let's go down even deeper. Like, what does that mean about me? And then I'm like, okay, so if my daughter doesn't do her homework, that means she's not going to do good in school. If she doesn't do good in school, that means she's going to fail. If she fails, that means she's not going to do good in life. If she doesn't do good in life, that means she's not independent. That means I'm not a good dad. And it literally, like, I walk this, and I'm like, am I a good dad? I'm like, yeah, I'm a great dad. Does her not doing her homework mean that she's going to fail? No, it does. Boom. Literally, dissolve the frustration. And now when you learn to dissolve your own frustrations, it's so easy to teach your kids how to dissolve their frustration. Your kids are a mirror image of you.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yesterday was a perfect example of that with, and I talked about it a little bit on the last podcast too. I was sitting here helping with schoolwork, and I had so much stuff on my brain. I was struggling with a bunch of different things, and I was having a hard time. And rather than taking that moment to step back and do that assessment you're talking about, I just kept on, like, I got to press forward. I told the kids, I warned them. That's a great way to say it, right? But I let them know. I said, hey, I am having a hard time right now. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my brain, and I really need your guys' help to listen to what Daddy's saying so I can work through some of these things, as opposed to just stepping out, analyzing what's going on, being able to actually be there better for them. I'm relying on a 9 and a 5-year-old to control themselves, as opposed to me sitting here and controlling myself. And I was like, what? Like, that's not appropriate of me as a dad, as an adult, to expect the 9 and the 5-year-old to control themselves. Speaking of, I'm going to have to go control this dog. I apologize. I don't know how bad you can hear that, but it is rough for me. Playing laser tag, and it's driving the dog bonkers. They're running around the house playing laser tag, and he's like, ah! So one kid's yelling at the dog, bouncing all over. But
But you were talking about the self-reflection, right? So like you got frustrated. So if you would have taken that moment and be like, all right, why do I need to get all this stuff done right now? You know, like, why am I frustrated? I got all this stuff I got to get done. Why do I need to get all this stuff done? Oh, because I need to provide for my family. Well, if I do all this, is it really going to provide for my family, or is it more about me being important? So I feel like I'm doing it. And then you walk yourself down the rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm going to the beach. I'm not even going to do anything. I'm done, you know? And I literally have these moments where I'll just be like, get super frustrated, stressed. I got so many things going on, and I start doing it. I'm just like, if I die today, that stuff's not going to get done anyway. And my kids are going to still move on. And my wife, and I look at my kids, I'm like, yo, you guys want to go to the park? And they're like, I thought you had work and all. I'm like, forget that stuff, bro. You guys are number one. Let's go. And we're out. And I just put everything on pause. And it's hard for people like us who are like entrepreneurs, don't want to give up, want to keep going. But the problem is that if we keep going that route, dude, our kids are become like an afterthought.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And then we always lie to ourselves. I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for my kids. Your kids just want you. Yeah. You know, like if I didn't live in this house and I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, it wouldn't make any difference in my kids' life. You know, like they just want to hang out with me. We could go to the park. We could still swim. We could still do all the things they love to do, but they'll just have a smaller bedroom.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about that. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast too, is because like in the military, I saw massive amounts of divorce. Like the military just, you see enough of it in society, but then you go to the military when you're talking about people leaving for 6 months to a year at a time, deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan and Africa and going all over the world, doing all sorts of stuff. And then you come back and, you know, there's like reintegration is extremely difficult to come back to your family. And like, hey, we've been used to dad not being here for the last year. And all of a sudden you want to come in and start being the authority and telling us where to go and what to do again. It's like, it became massive issues. Where there were some guys that I met that I didn't even know they had kids. Because like I had never seen their kids. I'd never heard them talk about them. They never see their kids. Nothing. It was like heartbreaking. Wow. So the second I became a dad, and I've been wanting to be a dad since I was like 13 years old. I remember wanting to be a dad.
That's awesome.
So then when I became a dad and I'm seeing all of this, I was like, no, I got to adjust my life. Like I can't continue traveling around the world being told where to go all the time, saying goodbye to my kids because the government wants to send me to some random, you know, crap hole in some place, you know. Or even if it was a nice place, like, I mean, they've sent me nice places, but like, it's still without my family, you know,
without your family. Yeah.
So then I started doing the entrepreneur thing. While I was in the military, I started building what the future was going to look like, but I built it all by myself. Like, this is what my family's future is going to look like. And never included my family in that conversation at all. Yeah. And then when I finally did include them into it, it was like, there's no way I could chase the future that I tried to create and still be a present father and husband. Like that doesn't make any, like I can't do both of these things. Right. You know, and then we have the blessing of being around a lot of pretty successful people inside of GoBundance and like listening to some of the folks with their regrets that they have of like, why I wish I would have spent more time with my kids. Sure, I'm worth, you know, X $100 million, but you know, my kids, you know, I never got to see them or I didn't get to, and like, that was good reminders for me. Like, no, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Like you stepped out of the military to be there for your kids. Yeah. So that's what they want. That's what they need. Like, why are you going to try to build something without them? Right. And that's why I love talking to dads like you. And like, that's why I have this podcast to be able to hopefully share that with other dads who are struggling with that same thought. Like, I completely redid all of my stuff. Like, granted, I still have what plane I want to buy for my family on my list, right? I'm a pilot, so I'm going to be the one flying it. So I can save money on the pilot, right? But I still have what planes I'm going to buy, like stair stepping on where we're going for the family. But it's not, you know, like this massive private jet thing that I was looking at before. It's like, no, like that's not what my family's going to need. My family's going to need something that we can land on some of these small private islands and do all these different things and have some fun doing all these things. Like, so I've restructured all of it, like the dollar values that I want to put to everything and how much, you know, net worth we want and all this stuff, because including them in that conversation was way more important because too many business owners do the same thing as the military. Only we're doing it to ourselves instead of the military doing it to us, you know? So I love that you're seeing that.
And usually a lot of the reason we keep grinding forward like that is really it's a scarcity mindset. We're always afraid that we're not going to have it, so we got to keep pushing forward. And I think people lose sight that success leaves clues, right?
Yeah.
So people who are successful have probably been successful before. Maybe it wasn't financially, but maybe it was in school, or maybe it was at sports, or it was something else. So you could see them through childhood. They've been successful. That kid has done well. And it's all a culmination of decision making. The choices you make today affect your tomorrow. And so success is really a culmination of those decisions. So they're always afraid, and me being included, is, oh man, I'm not going to have enough money to support my family, or I got to keep building so that I'm safe. But what ends up happening is you have this finite amount of time with your children. And that finite amount of time is going to come to an end. And what I mean by that is your child right now lives in your home, and you get to see him, and you are his world. And at some point, he's going to want to go to college, or he's going to want to start working. And then his time is going to be taken by something else. And you become, I get to see my kid maybe on the weekends. And then eventually he gets married, or she gets married, and they have children. And then it becomes even less and less. Oh, we're going on this vacation, or we're going this or that. And so here's how I kind of like structured my life. And again, because I'm so regimented and routine, I was like, okay, go to school in my 20s, build my business in my 30s, spend my time with my children in my 40s. And then at some point in my 50s, they're going to kind of start doing their own thing. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to work for purpose, do only purpose. Now, obviously that didn't work out like that, because I can't just sit around and do nothing all day. But I found my purpose in my 40s. So now I get to align my purpose. And so I sat there and thought, okay, my kids are in school for 6-7 hours a day. And they come home, they have homework. Then they come home from homework, and then they have after school activities. And I'm getting to see them for 1 to 2 hours a day. I'm like, that's trash. Yeah. It's trash. And I'm like, we're gonna shift that. So I'm like, we're gonna do the homeschooling. I'm gonna be the biggest influence in their life, not their teacher who's got their elementary education degree. And I want to pass on my coaching experience and my network of people and my mindset. And what we're going to do is now I'm going to shift from seeing them 2 hours to seeing them 8 and 9, right? And then the rest, they get to go play with their friends or explore activities or do other things. And that's fine. But majority of the time, I get to spend with them because I only have that finite amount of time to do that. And that's for the next, 8 to 10 years. And then when they go out into the real world and they have to build their own, they'll always be like, man, I spent a lot of time with my parents. My dad. Yeah. My dad was awesome. Like my dad. And I try to be as involved as possible. I coach the basketball team for YMCA. I'm their jiu-jitsu coach, and you learn real life lessons on the mat. Every time we start, there's a life lesson, and when they finish, there's a life lesson. And it's beautiful because I get to pour into all these kids, and those kids are part of my son's community and my daughter's community, and they're both in jiu-jitsu. And so I get to do that, and then at home, I get to bond with them, right? So I'm like their superhero. Like my son used to literally call me his superhero. Like when I'd walk into his school, he'd get so excited. He'd be like, "That's my best friend. That's my superhero," right? Why? My dad's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got muscles. He's a doctor. He helps people. He's this. So we have to show our kids. We're showing by example, and that example is, hey, I want to be here for you. Not, hey, I'm too busy right now. Can you leave? I'll come and talk to you later, and then later becomes tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes the weekend. And now they're learning. Versus, oh, my dad always makes time for me. No matter what. I care about you guys.
I love that. Yeah, I've been trying a lot to tell my kids, like, I will adjust my calendar for them. Does not matter. Like the calendar, I live in, if it's not on my calendar, I'm going to forget to do it. So I need to have it in my calendar. but there's nothing on my calendar that outperforms my kids. Not outperforms, but that is over my kids. And when I chose to do, even like my business partners, when I chose to do homeschooling, I had to talk to all of them, not to get their approval, but to tell them like this is super important to me to have my kids around, to be able to impact my kids in that way. And I mean, there's nothing. I can't think of I talked about it a little bit at the Florida events. I think you left like 2 minutes into my dad talk, or was that you that left in the middle of my dad?
No, I was there the whole time.
You were there for the whole thing, yeah. I forgot who it was, but I had to harass that person for leaving in the middle of my dad talk. But I talked about it a lot there as far as like where was I going with this? I was too busy.
You talked about it as a business. You're talking about
I was
running
talking to them about a business, but it was like I don't remember where I was going with this specific thing, but it was super important. It's always super important to me to let my kids know, like they are the number one. Like it doesn't matter where I'm at. And I say number one, but what I tell them all the time is like I've got God's number one, my wife is number two, and my kids are number three. Mm-hmm. After that, it's anything else. I don't care what it is. After that, it's anything else. I keep getting told that in between God and my wife, I need to put me because I don't do a great job at that, right? But like they know that it does not matter. And the other day we were doing something in the house, and we started instituting like a middle of the day playtime with the kids. Yeah. Because my son was like, hey, we were up at Fambundance up in Vermont. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, what can I do to be a better dad? Like, where can I improve to be a better dad? And he's like, it would be nice if, it's my oldest, Adam. He's like, it'd be nice if like maybe like for 20 minutes a day, you can just come and just play with us as kids, like in the middle of the day. Because they see me in here. I've got glass windows on the office door. So they see me sitting here at my computer all the time. And it's like, I just like in the middle of the day. So it's like, no sweat. So we sat there right then and there, put it in there 3 times a week for half an hour each one of those days, that in the middle of the day. So now they'll come, what are we going to do? Like I think Tuesday we played Spies and they loved it. Like they thought it was great. So they busted out their Nerf guns. They got it all set up. I'm like taking pictures of them getting set up to play Spies. We go in the backyard. We're playing Spies in the middle of the day. It was a lot of fun to just go and play and have, and why not, And there's been a few times where they weren't done eating yet. And I was like, yep, calendar's wiped. Don't sweat it. Like I just moved three meetings. You guys finish eating. We're going to go play. We're going to get this in. Yeah. And I love it. It's so much fun just to kind of see. And I'm hoping, my goal is that they remember those moments.
Record them. I record a lot of this stuff. So you know why I record it? Because kids forget. So every time my son has like a really serious conversation with me, I'm like, hold on, let me turn on the phone. And we have a conversation, or we do that. Because one day he's going to be like, how was I raised? And I'm like, boom. Bro, watch these videos. You'll get a quick kind of like breakdown or highlight of how I raised you. Yeah. And so there's no denying it, where it's like, oh, you were never around. Oh, I was around, dude. I was around a lot. Yeah. I actually bought this book. It's called Homeschool Family Fitness, but it has a ton of games that you could play with your kids, like hundreds of games. And the games are like great because it's like fitness games, but they're games like that you can play. So what we do is I'll just pick one. So I do the same thing. So the way I break up my schedule with my kids is in the morning time, I wake up early and then I study, or I learn, or I read, or I do my thing, right? And I have my morning routine, and then I get them to do their morning routine with me, which includes journaling, breath work, all that stuff. And then from there, I go to the gym, they go to the playground, or we go to the beach and we all hang out. During the midday, now before when they were in school, when they came home at 2:00, I blocked my calendar from 2 to 2:30. They would have their snack and then we would play. Mm-hmm. We have to play every day. And then after 5:00, we play. So now with homeschooling, their lunch is literally the same time as my lunch. So we have a 12 to 1 break, and 12 to 12:30 is their lunch, and then from 12:30 to 1 is play. Now my son, he loves to wrestle. The guy just loves jiu-jitsu. So we wrestle 20-30 minutes, and to him it's the biggest bonding ever. My daughter is different. So, and I will say I struggle a lot with playing with my daughter because I grew up in a house with all boys, and I'm a true alpha, and my daughter is a girly girl. And it's like, hey dad, you want to play with these diamonds and like we can play magnet diamond or this, and I'm just like, oh my god, it's like pulling teeth, right? So I'm like, how about we go play like cops and robbers or guns or this and that. But I will concede to what she wants, and we will do it. And but it's great because you're bonding with them. And then after work, I break from 4 until 4:30. We have a play session, and then usually they have their after school activities or whatever they go to, and then we always have dinner together. So it's important. Awesome. The more you play with them, the better.
Yeah, the wrestling thing, my boys absolutely love. Like, shocking, right? My two boys, they would jump from the top of their bed to launch down at me and attack me. Like, it got to the point where the older he got, so I've got multiple issues in my back, and like if my bulging disc is like inflamed that day, it turns into a problem, right? But he's got me once where my oldest, I think he was probably 5 at the time, maybe, and I was having a flare up in my back. He came right up behind me because random punches are pretty normal with your boys in the house, and he got me right in my back on that spot and dropped me. I was like, I was on the ground on my knee, and he's like, Daddy. I was like, it's okay, we're all right, we're okay. Like, I'm just like, so it got to a point where I had to like, okay, now we have to ask Daddy before we hit him.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's also getting a lot more power behind him too, even at 9. Like the amount of muscle that kid's got. But man, oh man, do they just love fighting? And we talk about with my daughter, like, I don't know what we're gonna do if she is a girly girl, because like my wife rides motorcycles and shoots guns, right? So it's like, okay, if we have a girly girl, both of us are going to be confused. We're not gonna know what to do. Like, it's but what I always try to tell myself though is because what I tell my boys is my goal is to raise them to be better men than me.
Yeah,
that's my goal in life. And what my goal in life for my daughter, that's a phenomenal question. So in general, what it means is that they are stronger both emotionally and physically. Like, they know how to control their emotions. They know how to be like have their emotional intelligence intact. I've gotten a lot better at that, but I know that I have a lot more work to go. So if I can teach them the same stuff that I'm learning on how to do it now, but they catch it at 10 as opposed to 40, right? That makes a huge difference, similar to what you were talking about, right? So to help them become much more emotionally intelligent, physically capable, lifelong learners, willing to be able to be men of God who are willing to stand up for their faith, as well as for their family, because I want them to be able to stand up for their family. So how we measure whether or not they're better than me, really not a thing, right? It's the same thing. Like, my boys have both, well, my oldest especially, he's like, Daddy, I don't want to be a better man than you. Like, he almost took that, like, because Daddy's superhero, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, I want you to be your kid's superhero as well. But I want you to do it with a lot more tools in your tool bag than I have. So if I could teach you those tools, like, that is immediately you becoming a better man than me.
Oh yeah.
So do I have a definition written down on that?
Well, no. that's why I asked that, right? Because a lot of people say they want their kids to be better than them, but they never really define that. Yeah. And so you're like, well, what does that mean, right? So like for me, just like you, is I want me at 40 to be them at 20. Yeah. So now what I've sped up is their learning, right? So by the time they're 40, they're going to be like where I'm at 60 or so on. And so we poured in and we made them better because we fast forwarded their learning. Yeah. And their experience.
So what I haven't narrowed down as much, because I've obviously thought through that. I should write that down just so I kind of have something to chase, and so that they understand what that means as well. And I have a better way of explaining it to them. But my daughter, I want her to see what it is to have a strong, godly man in the house, so that she knows what to be looking out for in a husband as well. Right? Like, I need to treat my wife in a way that she looks at that and says, man, I want my husband to treat me just like dad treats mom. Yeah. And I haven't quite figured out exactly how to write that down either, right? No, to really know,
Kids are watching. You have a role in that home, and they've already taken the role, and they know exactly what that role is. So they've labeled the relationship. So it's important that you always show that, and because kids learn more from actions than they do from vocalizing it.
It's caught, not taught.
Oh yeah, caught and taught. I like that. And I see it with my parents. Yeah, I mean with my kid. My son's already like, oh, I want a woman that's like this, and I want to get married to. And I'm like, well, what? Because I'll tell him, I'm like, do you like her? And he'll be like, no. And I'm like, why not? She's always arguing. And I'm like, interesting. I'm like, why don't you like that? He was like, well, I want somebody like you and mom. Like you guys always like get along and you don't argue and you have conversations. I don't want somebody that's just going to keep arguing with me. And I'm like, oh, he's aware.
Yeah.
He's 7. He's already noticed that he doesn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're learning from us. Now, if they were in a home where they're always arguing, they might just think that's the norm.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right.
And what an exhausting way to live too, right?
Oh, God.
For the kids, even like the kids living in that environment, that's exhausting. You brought your wife back up again, so I want to go back to a question I had on the last page. So you had talked about how have the conversations been with you and your wife as far as raising kids, right? You've obviously taken a lot of this internally. You've done a lot of this conversation with yourself, so you know where you want to go. How do those conversations go with your wife before kids? So that the reason I brought this up is going back to the conversation you had where you brought your wife and your son in so they could have a conversation, right? So how did you get to the point where that is a comfortable conversation, and how much conversation did you and your wife have before you had kids on how you wanted to raise kids?
So I didn't want kids. As a kid, I wanted to get married and have kids, but by the time I hit like 30, I was like, I don't want any kids. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to like see the world, live in other countries, do all this stuff. And I was like, all right, if I have kids, it's going to be like a hindrance. And when you don't have kids, you don't really know. You don't know what you're missing, right? So I was like, I know that right now, I don't know what I'm missing, and I'm good with that. But I know the moment I have kids that it's going to be a very different situation. And so my wife was like, no, she was like, we got married so we would have kids and we would raise kids. And I'm like, we were married now at this point, like 5 years before we had our first. Mm-hmm. And so she hits me with like, I want kids. And I'm just like, she was like, we have to have them because at some point, if you decide you want them and I'm too old to have them, then it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And so we had our first, and I told my wife, I was like everything else in my life, I don't want to go into this blindly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was like, if I'm going to learn jujitsu, I've got a jujitsu coach. If I'm going to learn business, I'm going to get a business coach. And I was like, we should probably talk to a childhood psychologist and try to understand how we should raise these kids instead of trying to pull this is what my parents did.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody, my parents raised me like this. And I told her, I was like, listen, I'll tell you right now, I was like, that did not work in my home. I don't want to raise my kids the way my parents raised me. And I was like, so I want a plan. She was cool with that. So for 2 years, we did like joint childhood therapy on how to raise kids. And listen, it's very hard, right? Because there's not a lot of science behind a lot of this stuff. Like for instance, my daughter was the type that she cried when you put her to sleep. Now, there's studies that show you should soothe them. There's studies that show that you should leave them so that they develop like an independence and that they learn, how to kind of soothe themselves. I don't know what the right answer is. So, and we tried both. Like we would sit there and it would be like, we put her to bed at like 7, you'd be in the room with her till 1 a.m. and she's still like up. She doesn't want to go to bed. The moment you walk out, she cries. And then she cries for 30 minutes and she goes to bed. So, but we learned a lot of tactics, more about positive reinforcement than negative reinforcement. But then we also knew where there was a place for negative reinforcement. Like there's punishment, there's timeout, there's this. And mind you, my kids now, I haven't put them in timeout in probably 3 or 4 years or 2 years at least. And I don't punish them anymore because they just know. Like now I have conversations with them like they're adults. But it took a while to get my wife on board with a lot of the things I do. Because guys like us who are in GoBundance, who are constantly growing, like I have 2 mindset coaches, I have a business coach, I'm in GoBundance, I'm around these guys. We're growing at a faster rate than 99% of the people in this world, right? So we're growing every year as if other people would be growing every 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so to my wife, just in the last 2 years, I've changed so much.
Yeah.
And I've been married 15. In the last 15 years, she's like, I don't even know who you are. Like, the person you were when we got married at 26 is not who you are today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, it's not. And I was like, and honestly, if it was, I'd be doing something wrong. I was like, because so it took a lot of time. There was a lot of arguments behind closed doors about like, I don't agree with this and I agree with that. And I'm like, all right, I'm a science-driven guy. And I'm like, so let's look at studies, right? So like, you want to have a conversation with your kid or you want to tell them what to do? You want to have Socratic method or you want to tell them what to do? Mm-hmm. You want to be an enabler or you want to be somebody who leads to independent thinkers? Do you want them to understand their feelings or you want them to suppress their feelings? And it was really just identifying. And when you start putting those things in perspective, she was very, very understanding. Because my wife's super easygoing, right? But she doesn't like change a lot. She's happy with where she is with everything. And so when I come up to her and I'm just like, hey, like for instance, she tells my daughter what to do, or she'll tell my son what to do. And I'll pull her aside and I'll be like, hey, can you ask them what they think they should be doing? And she's like, why? I was like, let's just get them to realize it themselves, you know? And I was like, it's not because I'm telling you I want this. It's because I want you to have a better relationship with them. When you tell them, you become a person who dictates. You ask them, you become a person who's collaborating. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, just try it, right? So, and she'll be like, well, your daughter will drive you crazy because she'll be like, hey, what time is it right now? And we're like, oh, it's this time. It's like, oh, okay, what does that mean? Oh, it's supposed to be my bedtime, but I'm not going to go, you know? and I'm like, cool. You're going to have that conversation. He was like, I don't have the patience. And I'm like, I get it. It's just like everything else. When you start running, you don't run 5 miles on day one.
Yeah.
You run half a mile. I was like, it's a stamina. You're going to build the stamina. And over time, that stamina that you build, and I tell her this, we've had this conversation so many times, you're not going to have to run those 5 miles anymore. I was like, because your kids are already going to know once you ask the question where it's going to lead to. Mm-hmm. So I've broken my kids in terms of those conversations. So I'll look at my son. I'm like, dude, what time is it? And he'll be like, I don't know. And I'm like, can you check the time for me? And he'll be like, oh, it's 7:30. I'm like, what's 7:30? He was like, yep, I got to prep for bed. I got to go shower. I got to brush my teeth. I got to do this. You know, so he's done his routine so that he's in bed by 8. And I'm like, cool. Glad you knew that, man. Take responsibility for yourself. I love it. That's true independence, you know? And he's like, and he just does it, you know? And the days where he actually does fight me, where he'll be like, Dad, I really just want to spend more time with you. And I'll just be like, dude, let's hang out. Forget it. I was like, how much time do you want?
Yeah.
And he was just like, how much time can I have? And I'm like, how? And I'll start with something like, how about 10 minutes? He'll be like, how about an hour? I'll be like, how? And I want to get to 30, you know? And then we'll have that. So it's become super easy because my wife sees how I am with the kids. Mm-hmm. And they're very open and I just ask questions. And so that's helped. But if I was telling her that I think we should have this conversation and then I'm going out here and being a dictator, it's not going to work.
Yeah. I think for 9 times out of 10, it all goes to communication. How do we communicate with our spouse? How do we communicate with our kids? Like if you're actually talking about it back and forth, as opposed to, you know, like I was talking about earlier with me creating our future for us without ever talking to them about what the future was going to be. Yeah. I just created their future for them, right? What a terrible way to have a lack of relationship. So, having those conversations has been very important for my wife and I as well, because I didn't really know how I wanted to raise kids. Even I didn't have a clue. You know, when we had our first kid, I was just on that beginning stages of learning what it meant to even save money, let alone, you know, build businesses and be a good dad and show, you know, be a good representative of the kids and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So, being open to having those conversations and being vulnerable for yourself, I think is extremely important to be like, hey, like I tell my kids all the time, like, dude, I've never been a dad to a 9-year-old, so I don't really know how to do this. Like
Yeah.
I'm learning how to be a dad to a 9-year-old, just like you're learning how to be a 9-year-old. So let's figure this out together, because I don't really know, but I do know how to be an adult. Sometimes I do know how to talk, right? So let's do that. Let's figure this out. I love those side conversations that my wife and I have about being parents, because the growth is really happening inside of those conversations for both of us in how to become better parents, and realizing how exhausted that we are, and that's why we did certain things that we did. Like I was talking about yesterday with what I did with my kids, like just mentally exhausted, and I was not in a good place. So,
dude, that's how homeschooling came about, because we had a real serious conversation about what we want for our kids and the future and the morals, and I said, like, we wrote it all down. My wife and I said, hey, we should sit down and really identify what we want for our children, right? And what are some of our biggest fears for our kids, right? And after we wrote them down, we're like, okay, are we walking down the path that leads them to these goals? And she was like, we're taking a chance. And I'm like, of course. I'm like, I was like, I don't want to gamble with our kids. I was like, the more educated you are in business about your field, and the more likely your business is going to succeed. If you're just going to open up a business and just have no idea, no business plan, well, you're gambling at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do your research and you understand, your chances significantly go up. So I sat there and I was like, we did that with our kids, with my wife. My wife and I talked about it, and then that's how we came to the conclusion that we're going to homeschool, because there were so many things that were so important to us that weren't being provided in school. And I listen, at the end of the day, I know we all want what's best for our kids, but if you can't do it, don't ever expect that from your kid.
Yeah.
Like I always tell my wife, if you're not able to get up every morning and study or read or learn, and you want your kids to wake up in the morning and study, read, and learn, you're kidding yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You got something else coming. If you want your kids to be athletic, but you refuse to work out, it's not going to happen. You want your kids to eat healthy, but you don't eat healthy? Dude, what are you doing? It's not going to work. It's impossible. Yeah. Right? So I was like, it all starts with us. We have to improve ourselves so that our kids could be where we want them to be. My kids see me, they're like, Dad doesn't eat sugar, no refined grains, no dairy, no red meat, no this, that. And they're like, all right, why, Dad? And we talk about it. And then I explain to them how we do studies and how we read it and how we understand the abstract and this. And they learn. And they're like, okay, we don't do any added sugar in our house. My kids don't eat cake and cookies and garbage. They've never had soda. They don't do any like caffeine. That to the rest of the world, that's like impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But to my kids, that's normal. And it's not, oh, Dad doesn't let us. It's, I don't want to put poison in my body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not Dad doesn't let us. It's Dad has completely overwhelmed my brain with information.
That's right.
Indoctrinated me into a different lifestyle, which all of us as Americans, honestly, have been indoctrinated into a certain lifestyle by, big pharma and the big farms and all the stuff that is getting pushed on us. So we might as well, if they're going to be indoctrinated, I'd rather them be indoctrinated into my way of thinking and my thoughts rather than, everybody else's thoughts.
Yeah,
and
into a healthier way, right? Because you don't want them. I remember one of the serious conversation my wife and I had is she would hit me with, well, everybody does it. 99% of the world does this. And I remember I specifically said this to her. I was like, every time you say that, you're just pushing my point even further. I was like, I want my kids to be different. Yeah. I want them to be the 1% different. So when you say everyone's doing it, you just proved my point as to why they shouldn't do it. Right? Oh, everybody eats cake. Cool. That's exactly why they shouldn't be eating. Everybody does this. I was like, because they should be different. And I know where she was coming from. She was addicted to the sugar. Mm-hmm. My wife was addicted, and she was passing her addiction on to the kids so that she could get what she wanted. And it was a very frank conversation. I was like, are you addicted to sugar? No. Cool. Let's stop sugar for a week. Oh, I don't want to do it. That's an addiction, babe. I was like, that's an addiction. The fact that you don't want to do it is your brain telling you you can't do it.
Yeah.
And when we stopped doing it, it became a lot easier. And now it's become so normal in our home. Like the no sugar. And listen, I'm not going to say that, they'd be fine if they ate sugar, but building habits that they can carry into the future is very healthy to develop at a young age. And what I'm doing is developing those really good habits now, so that when they're older, they're in their 20s or 30s, and they're like, how do I lose weight? Why did I get this? Why did I that? They've already developed all those good habits. They're never even going to experience that world. And so, and we've learned to modify, right? So like you can get some dark chocolate, like 99% cocoa and you put it with a date, right? You melt it on a date and you put some peanut butter on top. Dude, it tastes like Snickers. It tastes like Snickers. It's insane. We have so many recipes that are sugar-free, and they're all fruit-based, natural, and the kids love it. And that sounds delicious. It's so good. Oh my God. And we have fruit bowls, vegetable bowls, nut bowls in our house, so that my kids can constantly snack on things that have micronutrients, vitamins, right? Versus empty calories of cookies and cakes and donuts and trash. And it's not good.
Yeah, I want to get rid of all sugars in the house, period. Like all of them, because that is something that, so carbohydrates as a whole anyway, especially the processed ones like you were talking about before, like they inflame my body terribly. And it just makes me want to never eat any carbohydrate, because it's really hard to narrow in, where it comes from. So I'm like, I just want to get rid of all of them, because I'm just like, my arthritis kicks in worse. I could feel the inflammation in my body, my joints hurting, the back problems and the neck problems start to inflame more. And it's just like, goodness gracious. Like,
so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How do you, if they're affecting you, how do you think they're affecting your kids?
Obviously they are. I don't know how they are, right? I don't know what they're doing necessarily to them, because I'll talk to some adults and they're like, oh yeah, carbs don't bother me at all. And I'm, which is mind boggling to me, because I'm like, golly, they destroy me,
Do you think it's not affecting them? Do you think
I don't think
it's not affecting them, or they think they're not aware that it's affecting them?
They're probably not aware that it's affecting them, right?
And this is how you know. So this is how I used to get my wife. I'd be like, hey babe, you should probably cut out dairy. Oh, dairy doesn't do anything to me. I'm like, cool. Stop it for a week. Let's just test it. Stop it for a week and then come back to it. So she'll be like, fine. After me bugging her forever, and then she'll do it. And then she'll be like, I feel bloated. And I'm like, do you think you always felt bloated? You just didn't know. And she'll be like, and so most adults have no awareness.
Yeah.
And kids aren't aware either. Like, I can't go to my son and be like, oh yeah, if you eat this, it's going to make you feel this way. He's going to be like, I feel fine. But when you can look at the adult, because at the end of the day, they have your gene.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're being inflamed from gluten or refined carbs or processed or artificial things, they probably are too. And they just don't know it, because they're kids and they burn so fast and they go.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about that. Now, kids are obviously more resilient, but they're at some point you got to build those habits, because they're going to carry them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. The downfall about being resilient is you could be resilient against pain, which eventually is going to break you down, right? It's eventually going to do it. Yeah. And I did the same thing with carbs. Like I did the keto diet for quite a while. And it helped me lose a lot of weight, helped me feel a lot better. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to reintroduce carbs back into my life. And I started bringing carbs back in. And then I felt dreadful. Yeah. I was like, oh. And I all the things that I had before, I was like, boy, I have literally always felt this. I just never knew that I was feeling it. Now I know that I just got normalized to it. Like it just was just part of, this is just how you feel, But then the addiction kicks back in. It's like giving cocaine back to a cocaine addict. They finally broke free from it.
It takes time.
And God bless, I just ate like loads of pizza again and acting like an idiot. I'm like, what is wrong with you, man? And I just always go back to it. So, and that's one thing, as I'm saying it out loud, is I'm teaching my kids that same process, though, of watching that up and down nonsense. Like if I'm just more stable with it and be a better representation to my kids, they're going to learn that a lot better too. I got rid of a lot of the stuff in the house. I got rid of all cereal. Now cereal might be a treat if we go to grandma and grandpa's. That's about it. Like if they have cereal there. But that's mostly because if cereal's in the house, I'm that cocaine addict with cereal. Like, I mean, I'll eat cereal 3 meals a day if it's there.
Wow.
I love cereal. Like, I mean, I could eat a box of cereal for dinner. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But I mean, I know that I need to do a better job with that. So,
but yeah, dude, even like something as simple as like my kids now, they walk after we have dinner. That's just like that's a known thing in our house. Like you walk after dinner. So like building those habits when they're young, and then everything you want for your child, you got to write it down, and then you start implementing it for yourself. And then you don't teach them by telling, you teach them by doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can't wait for, and I don't want to use this as an excuse to delay it, but I can't wait for my wife to retire. She retires next year, done from the military. She'll hopefully be like done, December, January timeframe of this year. But I think that's going to help us out a ton, because right now, like with her busy schedule, my busy schedule, we use that as a crutch to just say, you know what, let's just do this quick food here, or just do this silly thing there. And it's like, man, oh man, I think we would get by a lot better if we just got rid of it all now. But which we should. But yeah, I love the idea of writing it all down. This is what we want for our family. This is who we are. That's the same reason that we created family values together now. So we have like core values as a family and what we're going to be doing. And I've been obsessed with this journey the last couple of years of trying to become a better dad and trying to become a better leader of the family and leader of business. So Adrian, I have absolutely loved this cover. Is there anything that we have not covered yet that you definitely want to
There's two things I want to cover.
Yes, please.
I want to cover the schedule for homeschooling.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to cover is being a business and entrepreneur dad with kids. Okay. Which is really, really important, I think, for people to hear, like, because us as entrepreneurs, we want to grow, we want to do things. And this is part of the reason why I shifted to homeschooling. And because I work from home. And so I want to be a business guy and I want to charge forward and keep going. But at the same time, I want to see my kids, right? Yeah. And so I don't want to go to an office and then come back and see my kids for an hour. So I've shifted my life, and it's super important that my kids see that. I let them know, hey, I work from home so I can see you guys. I want homeschooling so I could see you guys. I want to have lunch with you. I want to sit down with you. I want my break to walk over to the homeschooling room and sit there and help you with a project, And that's extremely important. Number two is I'm super big on like affection. I kiss my kids. I hug them all the time. And I tell them I'm going to do that for the rest of your lives, because you guys are my heart and soul. And number three, the schedule.
Why do you think that affection is so important? I know that you mentioned when you were a kid, that was something that didn't happen like between you and your dad, right?
Even my dad to this day, when I hug him, he gets weird. He gives me those pats on the back, like, I like, get the hell off me, dude.
Why do you think that? Because I'm the same exact way. I want to, I'll look at my sons and I'll be like, hey, buddy, guess what? And he's like, you love me. I'm like, yeah, buddy, I do.
Exactly.
I love you. And that's it. And it, like, to me, it's super important. But I want to hear from you why you think that that's so important.
So it's super important that because people need to be comfortable with their feelings. Too many people hide who they are and what their feelings are because of societal norms, right? Like, are you jealous? No, they don't even think. Maybe you are jealous. Maybe, you know what? I have a little bit of jealousy inside me. Where's that come from? But it's okay. It's okay to feel your feelings. Are you angry? No, I'm not angry. And they're like angry saying it, like, no, it's okay. It's okay to have those feelings. It's okay for a man to kiss their kids and show affection. I swear to God, I remember working in the pharmacy and we had a security guard. And my dad walked in and I gave my dad a hug and a kiss on the cheek. And the dude almost lost it. he was like, whoa. He was like, you kissed your dad? And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, dude, he was like, I barely give my son a hug. I was like, that's where you're messing up. You got it. So I let them know that it's okay to show affection. We do it to each other. We show love. We show affection. It's okay to be who you are and those norms. And so that's a big part, because I know my son is going to be an alpha. I could already tell from now. The way he is in jiu-jitsu, the way he takes control, the way he likes to be a leader, the way that, so being an alpha with a loving and compassionate, empathetic personality, bro, that's amazing. Because now you get the best of both worlds. You get to navigate. And so that's really, really important. And also because I want them to show that back to me when they're old. Yeah. I want that to come back to me. I want them to be like, hey, Dad, like, I love you. And they hug me and they kiss me and they do those things. And it also shows vulnerability. And vulnerability is so important in growth because it allows you to let your guard down. And when you let your guard down, you're open to growth and learning. If your guard is always up, it's going to be really, really hard to adjust. And that's a difficult thing. That's a hard life to live. So those are the main reasons. And then when it comes to the schedule, so I took all the things that I wanted for my kids. I wrote down a list, and the list had like maybe 100 different things, where it was like public speaking, social development, dance, yoga, all these things. And I sat there and I categorized them. At what point in their life are these the most important? And so like yoga was like teenage years. Okay. Versus etiquette was elementary. And what I did was I put that together a curriculum that embodied all the things that schools didn't teach, but that were super important for a child to know. For instance, I have electives from 2 to 3, and you saw that on the chart. And we have public speaking, etiquette, social development, what were the other ones? I forget the other ones. But, executive functioning, which is organizational skills. And those are extremely important because they're not covered in schools. Yeah. So public speaking, right? Staying, for instance, verbal changes in verbal, the tone. Tone, right? Very important. Looking someone in the eye. Asking questions. So what we did is we have a list of all of the things they need to work on, and we take one and we do a project every week, and that project will have that focus. Now, over the course of a year, so we also made the school week 4-day week, and Fridays are for projects, assessments, and field trips. There's always a field trip, so they get to go out and kind of do something, which is incredible because so now I get to teach them etiquette, manners, and we role play. Like, it's so awesome. We get to role play. I get to coach them. So last week I took them to the park, and when we got to the park, I was like, hey guys, I'm like, there's 4 kids in the playground. Okay. I was like, we're going to walk up. Hey, we're going to introduce ourselves. Hey, I'm Adrian. I'm Lana. Would you guys like to play? We're going to have 3 games that you can offer. We can do this, or what would you guys like to do? Okay. And I was like, so now role play it with. And I have my son say it back to me. Hey guys, my name is Adrian. This is my sister Lana. We're going to introduce. I was like, would you guys like to play together? We could play 1, 2, or 3, or what would you guys like to play, right? And I was like, now what you've done is you've identified who you are, your intention, and what you've taken control of the situation to lead it into a direction where it's more of a collaboration. And I made them role play it with me 2 to 3 times before they stepped into the playground. Yep. And then they got it and they went out. And dude, they were the whole playground. And all the kids were like playing. Every time a new kid would walk into the playground, all the other kids now were like, hey, you want to play with us? Nice. And so it was awesome. So kids don't like, people are always like, oh, when you homeschool your kids, you're not going to they don't get socialization. Dude, they do. They get socialization with specified coaching versus in school. It's like, oh, hey, let's pour milk down my nose and see. No, they're not getting. You're coaching them to be socially, to socialize the right way now. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot more room for growth. So I'm really excited about the schedule. And they get religion, they get languages. I got 2 languages that they're covering in their schedule. They get technology classes. Everything is so customized so that they get learning the things that they should be learning. And even in math, we have 2 days designated to math, how it applies to business.
Nice.
So they get to see that. So so I'm really excited for that. Those are the biggest things that I would say. And again, if you want your kids to be a certain way, start with yourself. And if that's hard, find a coach and figure out what limiting beliefs you have about who you are that's preventing you from wanting to do those things.
Do you have a hard stop after this?
No.
No? You want to stay on for a few more minutes? You good with that?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Yeah, I don't have a hard stop, but I want to dig into some of this a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Because I love your schedule and the intensity and intentionality you brought behind it. When you're sitting there coaching your kids and you're talking to them about certain things, and how did you develop the way you want them to view the world, right? Because obviously the way we view the world is different than how they are going to view it, no matter what we're trying with them. So how did you kind of develop the view that you want them to have, and the purposeful direction that you're giving them to help guide them onto that view?
So I always start with the basic needs, right? Like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is I need my kids to feel safe, secure. And so it all starts with that, because if they have safety, they have security, they have love, then they've already gotten past the first stage. The second stage, because most kids, like if you see a kid who's like really shy or like doesn't know how to talk to people, there's some type of safety issue there. They're afraid of something. So maybe they're afraid of being judged, or afraid of ridicule, or afraid of like that person. So safety is very important, and I build that in them. Like, hey, I got your back no matter what. I'm watching. Nobody's going to get near you. Like you're super important. Like you're awesome. Just the fact that you went over there, you're awesome. So I make them really feel safe. Once we've gotten past safety, they become themselves, and they just release. Because if you ever notice, when you're playing, kids playing basketball, after they score, what do? They look over to their parent. When they mess up, what do? They look over to their parent. They're always looking for security, safety, and importance. They want to feel valuable. They want to feel safe. They want to feel secure. So if you give them those, I constantly drill it. I got your back no matter what. Like my son will be like, Dad, what if the strongest man in the world came and tried to kidnap me? I'd be like, I'd kill him. He'd be like, and he gets all happy. And I was, and he's like, what if Spider-Man tried? I was like, I'd kill him. He was like, but you can't kill Spider-Man. I was like, bro, Spider-Man got nothing on me, dude. So I just want him to feel safe always. So that safety builds their confidence. It gives them their first level of confidence. And from that point, the coaching and how I want them to view the world is, hey, I want you to view the world as safe, because I always have your back. Now, as they get older, they're going to realize more and more that the world is not a safe place. So we have these conversations about kidnappers and this and cars and yada, 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 internet safety and opening the door, and I was like, in those situations, I can't protect you, so you have to learn to protect yourself. And here's what you do. But as long as I'm there, I got you no matter what. And so I'm always there with them while these situations are happening, because I've already given them that feel of confidence and safety. And over time, so like my son now, he will randomly walk up to grown-ups. So when we were at that playground, there was a guy, a man, he had his kid, but the guy had a football. And the guy probably was like 40. My son literally walks up to him. He was like, you want to play football? Play catch? And he just walked up to the guy. The guy was 40. And the guy was like, sure. And they just start playing catch. That guy has no idea that that's my son. But my son felt confident and safe because he knew I was there. He knew going up to that guy, if that guy tried anything, Dad's going to kill him.
Yeah.
So that's super important, is to establish that. And I know you do the same thing with your kids, right? You're always like, make them feel safe. And so that's the first level of confidence in your children. And then you encourage them to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. I want you to walk up to that person and ask them for the bill. I want you to pay with that credit card. I want you to go up to that person and ask them, hey, where can I find a restroom? I want you to go up and to those kids and say, hey, would you guys like to play? And I'm like, guess what? The worst thing they can say is no.
Yeah.
And then once they realize that it's not that scary, it becomes so easy. And that's
my oldest. I've struggled with that a little bit with my oldest, because he knows for sure that if daddy's around, he's safe. But he almost relies on that safety and security, right? Like, oh, dad's here keeping me safe, so I don't need to do some of those things, is what it almost feels like, Like, I don't need to say anything to that person. And so I've been working on that, exactly what you're talking about, like having him go and order something, having him, sitting at the table right here, you're going to order, making, like, I kind of gauge whether or not the waiter or waitress is going to be accepting of that, right? Because sometimes you could tell they're just like, they're not ready for that, and that's just going to be a worse experience for my kid than I need it to be, right? So I kind of adjust that a little bit, but I want to make sure that he is always out and doing that, but he's much more the sit back and observe what's going on, and not open his mouth. Where the middle boy, the youngest boy, Rourke, he is always out there. He's ready to say hello to everybody. He's never met somebody he doesn't know. Yeah. He's never met an enemy. It's always a friend that's out there, and I love it.
He feels more safe, probably. He's not as cautious as your older son.
Yeah, and I would venture to guess it's because of the work I've done on myself over the, because I started the journey again after having kids. I was like, oh boy, I really need to adjust this, which means that they're growing up with a different dad. So it's interesting to see how that has affected the two of them. But
the other thing, go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say, the other thing I forgot to mention is I make my kids, when they journal every day, do gratitude in the morning and in the evening, and it's been amazing to see that growth, because I've shifted their personalities in terms of happiness, because everybody's looking for specific situations to make them happy. I always tell them, like, I've explained to them that happiness is within, and I said, I'm going to show you exactly how. And I'm like, you guys journal every day, right? I'm like, when you start saying things that you're grateful for and why you're grateful, it's not just I'm grateful for waking up. I'm grateful because I woke up this morning because I get to spend another day with my family. You always explain why behind it. It pivots the mind to think and to find the positive in almost every negative situation. And I said, happiness is within. You can create your own heaven or hell inside of you by just thinking about, if a bad situation happened, if you focus just on the bad, you are living in hell. But if you say, oh, this happened, but that's going to allow me to do this now. Now you've focused on the positive, and you've created that happiness or the joy inside of you. And if you live your life that way, it's great. The other thing in the journal is I constantly bring empathy. So to focus on what positive things happened to you the previous day. Also, compassion. So, hey, think of someone in your life that you love. And this is the family journal that I created. So it says core values. So there's a core value exercise, and you write down your core values. And then inside, there's a morning part and the night part, and the evening part. In the morning, it's, your top goals for the day, and then one positive experience that happened to you yesterday. And then think of someone in your life and write down 5 things you love about them, and then what you're grateful for, and your daily affirmations. And then the evening is your biggest challenge and how you overcame it, top lessons learned, today's wins, what you're grateful for, and did you complete your chores and your notes. And so what it does is each single item on there affects the way they think about stuff. So setting goals, super important. So you identify what you're striving for that day. Your daily affirmations. Who are you? Who are you? I'm safe. I'm strong. I'm a warrior kid. My son loves Jocko.
So did my boys.
So.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what was your challenge? What did you deal with? How'd you overcome it? What lesson did you learn from today? And then what were your wins? What were you grateful for? And so at the end of the week, on day 7, this is our family meeting day, we compile the list. So what were your top wins for that last week? What were the lessons you learned from that week? What was your biggest challenge? How did you overcome that one challenge? And what are your goals for the following, your big goals? And so we do this every week, and it helps build that positivity, that safety, that, hey, I'm smart enough to figure things out into their mind. That builds their confidence. So I just want to say that it's super important for kids to have that.
I love that. The Warrior Kid has been fun for me to be able to have chats with my kids about that. And so there's a buddy of mine that business partner / friend. He was just down here, and we went golfing. Me, him, one of my other partners, and my son. So the 4 of us went out. And this guy's son is 10. He turns 11 later on this year. And the kid's goal, one of his goals, to be, I think it was top 5 or top 10 in the world's golf championship for kids.
Wow, that's a big goal.
He's super good. Like, he's a really good golfer, and he's got a really good caddy for a dad. Like, his dad is an awesome caddy. So while he was down here, he said, "Hey, do you mind? Like, we played a round where it's called 666, where you play 6 holes with each person that's out there. So there's 4 of us. So you play 6 holes with each person on the teams, and you're just rallying it up." So he was like, "Hey, when I'm partnered with your son, do you mind if I caddy him?" And I was like, "I would love for you to do that," because I'm like taking notes about how he's caddying, how he's good, because I am not the best caddy, right? I'm an okay golfer, which means I'm just a moderately okay caddy, and I know that I can show up better for my son and how to do all of this. But he actually came down and he caddied him. I had him on the podcast just a few weeks ago, he came and he was caddying my son, and the way he talked to him, the way he just helped him know that, like, it really doesn't matter where the shot goes. It matters that you're confident in what you're doing. It matters that you're enjoying this game, and we're going out and doing these things. But he had this journal. It was a sports journal, and my son is now excited to go and write down the sports journal. Like, he wants to go in and do it. And it's like the first 60 pages is all about that, the mindset side of it. Because mindset, especially, like, mindset's important everywhere, but in golf, it will annihilate your game. I would imagine similarly in jiu-jitsu. If your mindset is not where it needs to be when you're out there, you are going to lose miserably, and it's going to suck. So I really want to, and to your point, like, if I'm not doing it, I started to try to journal, and I'm terrible at it. Once I do it, I feel good. I'm just terrible at making it a part of my routine. So I want to write those things down, like you said. I mean, like, the amount of tactical things that I'm taking away from this are awesome. So hopefully, if anybody is listening, which maybe I have 3 people listening to this one, we'll see.
So if they take anything away, fast forward to this one thing. If you can't do it, don't expect it from your kids.
Yeah.
Shift it to who you are, and then it becomes part of their life as well.
And I would imagine, and maybe you can relate this to the business side as well, because I would imagine to be the similar thing. Like, if you can't do it as a leader in your business, why are you expecting everybody else to do it, right? I mean, we talk about that in business all the time, right? Like, you've got to be willing to mop up the bathroom to expect everybody else to be able to take care of the facility the same way you do, Like, why do we not look at that same thing with our kids? Like, oh no, you need to eat all of these things while you're out ordering pizza all the daggum time.
Yeah, dude, that's trash.
Yeah. It's they do as I say, not as I do culture needs to disappear, And I think that was a lot more visible when we were, well, maybe not. Maybe it's just because of the world that we've surrounded ourselves by. But that seemed like it was a lot more visible back when we were younger.
Well, social media has its pluses, but it also has a lot of negatives. It's corrupted the hell out of these kids, and they're living this life to be like these social media influencers. These influencers are marketing geniuses, right? They're just trying to get attention. And so it's bad. That's why I'm like, I don't know how other people view social media for their kids. Some people are like, yeah, it's great. They get to express themselves. They get to build a YouTube page. They get to do this. They get to do that. And, I could be hindering my children by not allowing them to do all these things. Like, we don't have video games in our house, and honestly, it's not even because I'm against video games. I grew up playing video games, and I love video games. My kids just don't care. They want to play sports. They want to go outside. They want to swim. They want to do rollerblades. They want to play hockey. They want to play basketball. They want to play soccer. They want to play things. They want to wrestle. So I don't tell them, no, you can't do that. Stay inside and play video games. Now, social media is different because they want to go on these horrible platforms so that they can follow these people who are doing stupid things, and then they want to mimic it. So I've had to eliminate that, and then now I have to coach them that why we use social media or why we use YouTube as a learning platform versus a following platform. So what are we using it for? We have to identify why we do this. And so we're going to go in and use YouTube, and we're going to follow people that align with what we want to learn. So my son is obsessed with, he wants to be a doctor. He's like, I want to help people. I want to do this. I don't know where he gets it from. And so I'm like, dude, you want to learn about health? Here are the big name guys, right? And so you could follow these guys versus some kid who's, doing bottle flip from 50 miles away or 50 yards away, and then it's like, or somebody's pouring milk down his sister's back and then she's going crazy. And then, I don't want them to get that addictive part because social media is addictive.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah. It's rough. I mean, it's addictive for adults, let alone kids. It's a boy. And then let's not even go down the path of what other things are out there on the internet and social media that besides the addictive part, but the dangerous parts of what they could get exposed to.
Dude, I know people who they'll start following something, right? Or here's what happens. They go through, they see something that is like, whoa, it surprised them. And then they only paused on it for 3 to 5 seconds because it kind of surprised them. And then 3 to 5 seconds later, now they get 2 or 3 more of those things because the algorithm sees that. Yeah. And then it becomes part of their social media and they're seeing it constantly. So now it becomes normal for them, which is something that's technically not normal or you want your child exposed to. And then they're like, oh, well, now maybe I should do that.
Yep.
And then they go down this road because all started with a hook that took 3 seconds. And now because they say, because you're a culmination of the 5 people you're around, right? But you're also a culmination of your environment. So if your environment is all things that you don't agree with, let's say, for instance, it's something that's not too egregious, but it's something that, like a tattoo, right? You scroll, oh, this guy has a cool tattoo. And let's say you're the type of person that teaches your kids you shouldn't ink your body, right? Take care of your body, don't ink it, or you might change your mind. And this isn't something that's really that serious, but I'm using it as lightly, but how easily you can be influenced. And so they look and it stopped for 3 seconds. Oh, they saw that was cool. Now the next thing pops up. You start seeing people who get tattoos all the time, right? Next thing you know, you start liking all these people. And now for the next year or two, all you do is see these people who are inked up, ink masters, and this and all this stuff. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to go get tats. I'm going to get all tatted up.
Yeah.
Right. And literally it started with a kid who could have been 10 or 12 that never in their wildest dreams would have even thought about getting a tattoo. All of a sudden that's his environment or her environment. And she's getting all tatted up. But now imagine that same thing with something that's not a tattoo, something that's a lot more dangerous, right? Yeah. And so this is where social media becomes really, really dangerous because you're teaching a kid to kind of create their own environment in a world of danger. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a call this morning. We're working on a program, a curriculum for how to be a biblical man.
Okay.
And one of the guys that he and I were agents together, and we did the Internet Crimes Against Children ICAC stuff, which is the
Dateline,
catch a predator, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So we used to do that stuff and go out and catch all these people, and it was the
really?
things
that you could see.
Yeah. It was one of the things they used to do, and we were reminiscing. It came up because my buddy had he's retired now, but he got a phone call hey, one of the guys that you caught before doing your ICAC stuff just got caught molesting his 11-year-old cousin. So he's on trial. We want you to testify based off of what you had before. Blah blah blah. So we were talking about it, and it was it's such a reminder, as my kids are now running around the house. I mean, when we were doing that, we had just had Adam.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is, 9-10 years ago, I was doing this. 10, 11 years ago is when I started doing that, those types of cases. But it was like the world that is out there and the access people have now is even more than it was 10 years ago. The things that people can do. And like, all it is, you're not finding the guy usually at the park anymore trying to attract a little kid like it was when we were kids. That also online. You didn't see. It's all online, right? And you like, protecting your kids is so different in the world that we're living in now than it was before, right? To your point, if I'm standing there, you better believe I'm going to protect you. My kids have always asked me that same thing. What if the strongest man in the world busts through the door? I said, there's a reason that Daddy knows how to shoot very well. I don't need to be hand to hand, but I will kill the person who comes through that house, right?
Yeah.
And then it turns into, of course, well, what if a massive dangerous wolf? Do you think you could beat a wolf?
Oh, you have those conversations too.
Oh,
yeah. I get those all the time. Oh my God.
It's hilarious. But the world that we're living in now is so different. And I struggle with the thoughts on the internet side of the house because I want them to be able to understand the tool that is there. It's similar to money.
That's right.
Money is a tool, just like the internet is a tool, right? You can use money for any number of things. You can use it for wonderful things, or you can use it for terrible things. The internet can be used for wonderful things, or it can be used for terrible things. So I want you to know how to use the tool, but I want you to do it safely and know that there are people out there that are bad. And like my son hates it that sometimes oftentimes if he's going on to a new thing, like he's doing some research project or something, he has to come to me and I have to type in a password to allow him to go to a certain website, because it's like, okay, is this like, I know it's annoying, but
we have the same
I know what the world is.
Yeah, exactly. You have to put those parameters in place. Otherwise your kids, you don't know what they're going to be exposed to.
You don't know the things that Daddy has seen, like the people that Daddy has met.
Listen, I always tell my kids the person on the other side is a kidnapper. I've built this fear. Like I fear is the person on the other side of that internet is a kidnapper. Okay, so we want to limit what we say. We want to limit what we talk about. We want to limit the information. Now they're not talking to anybody. My kids are young. But I know in the next couple of years this is going to be something that's going to have to step into the forefront of our lives, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to combat it yet. Yeah,
well, let's figure that out together. That's why we do things like this, so that we can figure these things out together, right? Because I don't know exactly how I'm going to combat it either, because I know there's going to be more that they're exposed to, and I know they're going to be there. But I want to control that environment as much as possible. I'm not afraid to have conversations with my kids. I'm not afraid for them to know what's going on in the world. I'm not afraid. I mean,
same.
Just this morning, they were asking me about war, right? Like I was in Iraq and Afghanistan doing some crazy things over there. Like, well, did you ever see this? Or did you ever see that? I will talk to them about everything. I don't care. So they know what Daddy has done. They know what Daddy has seen. Obviously, the graphic side of the house, I won't go too far into some of that, but right now, anyways, at 9 and 5. But they know that there's danger out there, and I don't know how best. They need to know. But I don't know how best to help them know how to control it themselves, right? Because sometimes we don't even know how to control some of that internet stuff.
The internet is extremely dangerous. I would say that's the real war that we're dealing with, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's right here in the present. No. It's on our grounds, and it could change literally the outcome or trajectory of how you're raising your child.
Yep, completely agree. So. But I've already kept you 21 minutes past. But no, Adrian, I greatly appreciate you spending some time and even some extra time with us. It was phenomenal. I really look forward to having round 2 if you're up for a second episode at some point.
Yeah, we got to go through all my routines that I do with my kid.
I know there's so many things I put started on here that I want to go back to, but by the time we hit an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm like, oh man. So we're definitely gonna have to go back to
crazy routines that I do with my kids that help kind of structure their day. So we'll talk about it next time.
Yep, I would love to. But if you can't, stick around for a second. But everybody, thank you so much for listening. Adrian, if people wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to learn more, especially about your functional medicine stuff you're kicking off now, or learn more about you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
If they want to learn about functional medicine, it's Adrian at apexfunctionalhealth.com. If they want to reach out to me personally, you could email me personally, Adrian.Accay, ACCAY @gmail.com. And I'd love to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Adrian. Thank you, everybody who's listening. I greatly appreciate you being on. Please like, subscribe, all that stuff. Reach out to Adrian for sure. As you could tell on the long podcast, we have a lot that we can learn from Adrian. So thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.